all my time at the show. This is the lowest I've ever seen anything get.
This woman was saying all this stuff like, you don't know the I am. So I did a little research and I found out who this Brittany
Okay,
in LA.
let's unpack the situation with Kenya Moore and her exit from the Real Housewives of Atlanta.
It really all stems from that incident at her salon opening, right? With Brittany eating.
Okay.
Yeah, that confrontation seems to have been the catalyst for, well, everything that's followed, extending way beyond just the show.
Exactly. And Andy Cohen discussed it on his show, Andy Cohen Live, with his co-hosts. Some things they said, specifically from John Hill, really seemed to land wrong with Kenya. Well, Hill was describing a picture Kenya shared of Brit, and he used terms like oral sex and revenge porn.
Wow, okay.
He apparently also mentioned the Me Too movement, sort of suggesting Kenya's actions could be viewed as sexual assault.
That's taking it another step further, sexual assault.
Yeah. And then another co-host piled on, saying Kenya basically sabotaged herself and her business.
So quite a critical take from the co-host, focusing squarely on Kenya's actions with the picture.
Right. And Kenya, well, she didn't let that slide. She responded directly in the comments on an Instagram post by the Bravo Shade Room that covered the discussion. She wrote, essentially, that sexual assault is rape, and then she made a pretty pointed comparison to the whole Phaedra Parks situation with Kandi Burrs.
Wow.
You know, when Phaedra falsely accused Kandi of planning to drug Portia Williams.
Ah, okay.
Feels like she's saying the term sexual assault is being misused, maybe even trivialized, by applying it here.
That makes sense, drawing that parallel. What about the revenge porn accusation? How did she address that?
Her approach there was kind of interesting. She brought up Kim Kardashian's sex tape as an analogy, basically asking if showing that would be revenge porn. Her point seemed to be that she found Brit's pictures online already. She implied they were public, that maybe a release was signed, calling her sharing it a fair receipt.
Right. So the argument is, if it's already out there, maybe with some form of consent originally, then her sharing it isn't the same as releasing private material maliciously. It's a defense based on the photo's prior public status.
Yeah, that seems to be the angle. She definitely came out strong. She warned people about getting her activated and pretty much demanded people understand Georgia law before making these kinds of claims.
That suggests she feels her actions are legally defensible, at least under Georgia law. And maybe that the co-hosts were speaking without fully understanding the legal definitions. You wonder if she's looking into legal action herself.
It wouldn't surprise me. She also talked about feeling there's bias and selective outrage. She specifically said the co-host's comments should not have aired on a podcast without, legal counsel present. And throughout her responses, she keeps bringing up something she feels is being completely ignored.
Which is?
What she describes as a clear gun threat from Brit during the initial incident.
Okay, yeah.
And she seems frustrated that the conversation is all about her posting the picture while this alleged threat gets overlooked.
Understandably so.
And this connects to something else. She shared a comment from an RHOA viewer on her Instagram story. This viewer suggested there might be racism happening behind the scenes.
Whoa, okay. That's a very serious claim.
The viewer was comparing how this situation is being handled versus how they think it would be handled on, say, The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. The viewer's opinion was that if the gun threat part had happened on RHOBH, Brit would have been fired on the SPOT. Recapping Kenya's side, she's strongly pushing back against the sexual assault label, equating it only with rape. She's refuting the revenge porn claim by saying the pictures were public. A receipt.
And all the while emphasizing this alleged gun threat that she feels isn't getting enough attention.
Exactly. And layered on top is this viewer concern, amplified by Kenya sharing it, about potential bias or even racism and how the network or production might be handling it compared to other shows.
We have reports on the resolution of the legal stuff between Real Housewives of Miami star Lisa Hochstein and her ex-husband Lenny. This has certainly been quite the saga.
It really has. I mean, as you probably remember, their breakup was far from smooth.
Understatement.
Yeah. This particular legal issue was a $50,000 defamation lawsuit. Lenny filed it back in November 2023.
Okay.
And it followed claims of abuse made by Lisa.
Okay, right. So let's unpack this.
Mm-hmm.
About a year and a half ago, Lisa had sort of hinted on social media, hadn't she?
Mm-hmm.
That Lenny had left her with bruises during their very, very public separation.
Mm-hmm. And then Lenny responded with his own allegations against Lisa.
Yep. But the latest now is that they've actually reached a settlement on this defamation thing.
That's right. A notice of settlement was filed. And maybe even more telling, they put out a joint statement.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. In it, both Lisa and Lenny acknowledged that the end of their marriage was, quote, A painful and highly public experience.
Which seems fair to say.
Definitely. And they specifically address images posted on social media back then, saying these led to media speculation and insinuations that didn't accurately reflect what happened. What's kind of striking here isn't just the legal resolution, but how public figures navigate retracting really serious allegations in the age of social media, you know?
Yeah, totally. It speaks volumes about online narratives.
And the potential consequences of public accusations, even within that heightened reality of a reality TV divorce.
So they're essentially, walking back those earlier implications. Is that the gist?
Precisely. The joint statement explicitly confirms that, and I'm quoting again, there was never any physical harm caused by Dr. Leonard Hochstein or Lisa Hochstein.
Wow, okay. That's pretty clear.
Yeah, and they state that any media insinuations from photos or posts suggesting otherwise are just not true. It seems their priority now is really just to close this chapter and focus on co-parenting their kids, Logan and Elle.
That is a very definitive statement. It also sounds like Lenny feels, vindicated. The report mentions his own statement where he says Lisa falsely accused him of heinous actions, calling physical abuse the worst of it. He really emphasizes that he's never hit a woman and that this accusation deeply affected him.
And what's interesting, too, is the resolution of the lawsuit itself. Lenny didn't just agree to drop his request for damages, but also to dismiss the case with prejudice, which is a legal term meaning it's closed permanently, can't be brought back.
Gotcha.
And on top of that, they've both agreed to cover their own legal phase. It really suggests a mutual desire to just put this specific conflict behind them for good.
It definitely sounds like it. The initial incident that seemed to spark all this was an Instagram story Lisa posted, wasn't it, back in November 2023?
Yeah, I remember that.
Where she circled what looked like a bruise and claimed she was being threatened and harassed by Lenny.
And that image did feature in the 5th season of RHOM, so it fits within their timeline of conflict.
Okay.
However, as the article points out, the image itself didn't actually specify who was responsible for the injury.
Right.
Lenny's side of the story was that Lisa got the bruise from a fall on their staircase. And he even accused her of infidelity with her current boyfriend, Jody Glidden.
Right. And Lisa has always maintained her relationship with Jody began after Lenny filed for divorce. It's all just such a tangled web, isn't it?
It really is.
And we should probably remember Lenny himself moved on pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Debuted his romance with Catherine and Alec even before filing for divorce.
Yeah, that was fast.
And got engaged to her not long after. Though they've had their own ups and downs too, splitting and then re-engaging.
But ultimately, Lenny and Lisa finalized their divorce in November 2024. Lenny agreed to pay significant monthly child support. So this settlement seems like the final step in trying to move forward from that specific fight.
Okay, right. Let's shift gears now to another reality TV universe that rarely lacks drama. Vanderpump Rules.
Ah, yes.
Our focus here is on Allie Lieber's recent account of her experience with her ex-boyfriend, James Kennedy, particularly around his domestic violence arrest. So Allie has opened up about the night of James's arrest, which was last December. She says it followed a bit of a roller coaster week for them.
Okay.
She just recorded the first episode of her new podcast, actually, with James as her guest. Everything felt great, apparently. But then came Kathy Hilton's Christmas party.
And what's fascinating here, according to Allie, is what triggered the argument. She says she learned that James had been drinking behind her back at that party.
Given his history.
Exactly. Given James's well-documented struggles with sobriety, this was apparently a huge point of contention in their relationship.
Allie said his demeanor just completely changed, and she could tell he'd been drinking, even though he denied it at first. She recounts the tension escalating on the way home in the Uber, and the fighting just continued. She reached a point where she just didn't want to be there anymore.
And it seems the situation got serious enough that the police were called, although Allie says she doesn't know who actually made the call. She states very clearly, though, that she wasn't physically hurt during the incident, but emotionally, of course, it took a huge toll.
Understandable.
She did ask the police to breathalyze James, but they apparently said they weren't allowed to do that, although they did acknowledge he was drunk.
So, following the arrest, Allie's mom came to help her move out. Initially, she says she just wanted space, still trying to manage James's emotions and her own heartbreak. But it seems a conversation with her therapist was a real turning point.
Yes, her therapist apparently helped her realize that the fairy tale she had maybe envisioned wasn't real, especially after learning James had continued to drink behind her back.
Right. That must have been tough.
And that ultimately led to her decision to end the relationship. She emphasizes that while she never felt physically unsafe, She describes this constant anxiety, like walking on eggshells, worrying about his next outburst. Allie also mentioned that, in a strange way, the public nature of James's arrest acted as a kind of wake-up call for her. She admitted she might have stayed longer if it had all remained private.
And then there's the Lisa Vanderpump angle. Allie claims Lisa called her about 2 months after the arrest, supposedly just to check if she was okay. But Allie suggests Lisa was also being very protective of James, almost like a mother figure, and that Lisa tried to convince her they were good together and should maybe reconcile.
Allie says Lisa even suggested she travel with James to his shows that weekend.
Despite everything.
Yeah, despite his shows actually being canceled at the time and Allie having just moved into a new apartment after their breakup, Allie just found the whole call weird and admits it momentarily made her question her decision. She also mentioned Lisa said something like, well, you were drinking too, which Allie found particularly odd.
It certainly sounds like Lisa was advocating for James, maybe seeing potential there or just wanting to protect him from the consequences.
And Allie was also asked about those previous abuse allegations made by James's other exes, Rachel Levis and Kristen Doubt.
Right. What did she say about that?
She admits it's a difficult topic because of her own experiences with James. She described their relationship as very toxic on both parties.
Okay.
But she does say she generally believes women and feels kind of guilty sometimes, sort of hinting that maybe Rachel and Kristen were right about their experiences. Despite everything, Allie says she believes James is a great person, but wounded, and she had tried to fix that.
Right.
She's now focused on her podcast and says she's no longer in contact with James. While she felt resentment and upset initially, she also felt bad for him, knowing he struggles with his sobriety.
That's understandable.
She is apparently proud of his return to sobriety and hopes he heals for himself. Looking ahead, she wants to take things slow in dating and find someone who is already whole and complete.
That's a very mature and thoughtful perspective from Allie, actually. She seems to have gained a lot of clarity about the relationship and what she needs moving forward.
Agreed.
Okay, let's move on again to another reality TV couple who've been making headlines for their separation, Brittany Cartwright and Jax Taylor from the Valley.
Oh, boy.
We have reports detailing a physical altercation between them, apparently sparked by Jax discovering Brittany was communicating with his former friend, Julian Sensley.
Right. And this happened while Brittany was supposedly trying to convince Jax she wanted to work on their marriage and move back in. The timing is interesting.
Yeah. So Jax claims they had been separated for about 9 months, and during that time they were supposedly allowed to date other people.
Okay.
But he says he found messages on Brittany's iPad where she was still talking to Julian, including what he described as inappropriate messages, even as she was saying she wanted to reconcile.
Okay, so from Brittany's side, she says she was at her rental home, Jax came over, went on her iPad, which their son Cruz uses apparently, and saw her texts with Julian. She admits sending a sexy video, but emphasizes, look, they were separated at the time.
Right, that's her point.
She says she didn't want the messages to cause problems, especially since they were co-parenting and doing a podcast together, and she felt they were getting to a point where they could work on the marriage.
But clearly, Jax seeing those messages had a very, very different effect. Brittany says all hell broke loose. She recounts this violent outburst where Jax allegedly flipped the coffee table and it hit her knee, causing immediate pain and bruising.
Oh, wow.
She says she was screaming and crying, and Jax was accusing her of cheating, even though, as she points out, they were separated and he'd been seeing other people himself.
It's a really disturbing account of the incident. Jax, in his own retelling, admits to going full fucking unhinged rage bad. His words. He acknowledges it was the worst he's ever gotten, even though he says he's been that angry before. He also mentions Cruz was in the other room and that he doesn't want his son to see him treating his mother that way. He admits what he did was wrong and that he lost all control.
Okay, well, admitting it is one thing.
But then he makes this rather troubling statement, asking to be shown a guy who wouldn't have handled the situation the way he did.
Oh, come on. That's a really problematic justification, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And Brittany, understandably, says that because Jax's rage has become so much worse, she cannot let Cruz be around him by himself right now. And adding another really significant layer to their story is Brittany's recent revelation about their son Cruz's autism diagnosis.
Yes. This is obviously very personal.
It is. And Brittany's decision to share Cruz's diagnosis is significant. You know, in a world where reality TV often focuses purely on drama, Her vulnerability here brings a really crucial and humanizing perspective to the realities so many families face.
Absolutely.
It could also encourage more open conversations about developmental differences, which is so important.
Yeah. So Brittany has opened up about the challenging journey leading to Cruz's diagnosis. They received it last fall when he was 3.
Mm-hmm.
She recalls that he initially hit developmental milestones early, talking, saying words like mommy, daddy.
Mm.
But then, as he got closer to 2, they noticed a regression in his speech. And eventually, he stopped talking almost completely.
Oh, that must have been incredibly worrying for them.
For sure. Brittany and Jax immediately sought help, got him into speech and occupational therapy. She shares that he is now primarily nonverbal, though he will occasionally say words like mommy.
Mm-hmm.
She admits it can be difficult, not having heard him say, I love you. But she emphasizes he's such a loving child and shows her affection every single day.
You can really appreciate the mix of emotions she must be going through.
Totally.
Yep.
When she got the autism diagnosis from Cruz's developmental pediatrician, Brittany says she was kind of expecting the news by then.
Okay.
And her perspective just seems incredibly strong and loving. She says she feels she was meant to be his mom and calls him her better half and little partner in crime.
Oh.
Even though he can't talk, she feels incredibly connected to him and understands his needs.
It's genuinely heartwarming to hear her speak about Cruz with such love and acceptance. She emphasizes that while their life might look a little different, she doesn't see it as a limitation for him at all.
No.
She hopes people understand that children with autism see the world in a vibrant, amazing way, and that there are no limits to what Cruz can achieve.
It's a great message. Brittany is focused on early intervention for Cruz, making sure he gets to all his therapy sessions, has all the support he needs. She's also incredibly grateful for her nanny, who she describes as family. And while Jax does sometimes take Cruz, Brittany feels it's important for her to be there, involved in his development right now. She also shared that Netflix's Love on the Spectrum has given her hope for Cruz's future.
Oh, that's lovely. Her decision to share Cruz's diagnosis publicly is also really noteworthy, I think.
How so?
Well, she mentioned that so many people had tried to diagnose him from social media, questioning why he wasn't talking.
Yeah, armchair experts.
She felt it was her right to share this when she was ready and when she had a better understanding herself. She sees herself as his voice now and wants to help other mothers going through similar experiences.
And amidst all of this, she's also trying to prioritize her own well-being. Admits it's been hard to take care of herself while focusing so much on Cruz, recognizes the need to find more time for herself and her health. Okay, let's quickly touch on some of the latest happenings from the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills in Atlanta. Let's maybe just highlight a couple of key developments from each to keep things focused.
Sounds good. So from Beverly Hills, we had Erika Jayne's unmasking on The Masked Singer.
Right, she was the Yorkie.
She was. And she couldn't resist throwing a little shade at RHOBH, suggesting she's actually funny, but, quote, they just don't let me be funny on the other show.
It seems her RHOBH castmates like Dorit and Kyle did react positively on social media, though.
Yeah, saw that. And there were reports of Erika reuniting with Kyle, Teddi Mellencamp, and Faye Resnick for a friend's birthday. They even got matching lit match tattoos.
Oh, okay. A little bonding moment there.
Speaking of Kyle, she's been addressing some of the RHOBH reunion drama, like Bozoma Boz St. John calling her a liar over those text messages with PK Kemsley.
Right. Kyle's sticking to her guns.
Yep. She maintained she never lied. She also spoke about Andy Cohen going hard at her during the reunion.
Which he did.
And shared an update on Teddi Mellencamp, who's going through radiation and immunotherapy for brain cancer. Says she's having some rough days, but staying strong and positive.
That's good to hear she's staying strong.
Yeah.
Kyle also hinted about wanting to do more acting and producing, maybe.
Following the reunion episodes focusing on those texts,
Yeah.
both PK and Dorit post some pretty cryptic messages on their Instagram stories, seem to hint that maybe a divorce is imminent.
Really? Like what?
PK's post talked about admitting you walked through the wrong door, while Dorit's suggested it's time to see people for who they show you they are.
And finally, over in Atlanta, Portia Williams has some strong opinions about Drew Sidora's storyline on RHOA.
She does. Portia has publicly stated she believes Drew's involvement with her own ex, Dennis McKinley, like working on music and filming RHOA together, is completely fake.
Wow. Okay. Calling it out directly.
Yep.
Portia feels that if Dennis is going to film with anyone on RHOA, it should be her, since he's the father of her daughter.
Makes sense from her perspective.
She even suggested the whole thing feels like a made-up storyline between Drew, Dennis, and Drew's estranged husband, Ralph Pittman, just to generate interest in Drew's music career. Portia claims there's no other reason Drew wouldn't have told her about working with Dennis. She also found it suspicious when Dennis allegedly texted her saying Drew was upset because Ralph thought some flowers she got were from him.
Okay, getting complicated.
And Dennis suggested Portia could use that as a storyline. Portia also pointed out she learned Dennis and Ralph don't actually have issues, which fuels her suspicion it's all for show. She even questioned Drew's divorce from Ralph, noting Drew was thinking about inviting him to an event.
Portia's perspective definitely throws some doubt on the authenticity there. It's not exactly uncommon for cast members to accuse each other of fabricating or exaggerating things for the cameras, right?
Sure.
Her direct accusations against Drew and the timeline she describes, it does paint a picture of a potentially contrived narrative.